Hello everybody, it's April 2nd, 2013, and I do want to apologize. I noticed when I was watching those last two videos that I was sniffling a lot. It's hay fever season and there are a couple of things that get to me, so I apologize for that distraction. Okay, well, you probably know by now that China is now massing troops on the Chinese-North Korean border, and of course none of this is good. North Korea is saying that they're going to fire up their old nuclear plants. The U.S. has sent a naval destroyer there, several stealth fighters, B-52 bombers, all nuclear capable. Does that mean that there's going to be, a war between the North Korea and South Korea and the United States? I think it's mostly just saber rattling, as a lot of people have said. The problem is it can spiral out of control if somebody does something wrong. As I've said before, North Korea's military hardware is 1970s vintage or older. Frankly, with the IPB that the United States can do, that's the intelligence preparation of the battlefield, identifying targets and things like that, the North Koreans really don't stand a chance. Of course, where I've said before, my concerns are, of course, China and Russia, and unconventional special forces units from North Korea infiltrating into South Korea, Japan, and the United States. So that's the real problem areas. Not that they can't do some damage conventionally, but they wouldn't get very far. I'm sure all of their units and all of their artillery placements and basically everything is already targeted by U.S. intelligence, and they keep track of it. It's those smaller unconventional operations forces that are the problem, so just stay aware of that. Talking about China, you probably should know by now that China and Australia are dumping the US dollar in trade between them. Here we go, see? So we've got all this stuff going on in the Eurozone, and a lot of people in the United States don't understand that the reason why China and Russia stand so much against any incursion by us in Syria and Iran is because they understand that it's the Western banking interests that are really pushing this, and that the reason why these wars are starting is to try to force these nations into Western international banking systems, the banksters. It's all about money. So, how far will the Russians and the Chinese allow these banksters to go? I don't know. But it's playing with fire, and it's wrong and aggressive on the part of the Western powers either way. They've pulled border patrol off the border, as you know about, and they say that the crossings have doubled now, not only because of that, but also because of the amnesty program of the government. Now, however you feel about this immigration problem, the fact of the matter is that they're allowing a lot of criminals to come across, and a Border Patrol agent who spoke on condition of anonymity talks about that so many of them are criminals. And I noticed there was a guy on one of my posts, I think it was for Borders documentary, he said that, where's the threat? There is no threat. Well, of course there is. They're infiltrating all through the country, and I don't mean just people looking for work. I'm talking about the drug cartels. I'm talking about that's an avenue for real terrorists if they wanted to come here. And yet, like I've been saying, the entire apparatus is being turned on the American people and not guarding our borders or the true enemies. So it's like I've said, I just don't see a whole lot of hope here. I see some problems. Global warming. Now, I'm not a scientist, okay? But this sounds really, really, how much BS do we have to swallow? They're now saying that the Antarctica ice shelf is getting thicker because of global warming. They blame cold weather on global warming. They blame the Antarctica ice shelf getting thicker on global warming. They're saying it's fresh water underneath that's melting underneath the Antarctica ice shelf. I don't think I was born yesterday. But, this is really starting to get out of hand. Every possible thing that they can use to argue this point. And and carbon taxes. CO2 is necessary for life. That's what the plants breathe. And so all of this is nothing more than just, trying to pave the way for more control and taxes. Government never gets enough. Okay, I mentioned in my last two videos, the problems with the United States. And, there are two critical masses that work here, and they don't necessarily have to be large numbers. The first critical mass is, do we have enough people that are decent and good to keep a good society? The other side, of course, is that there's a critical mass where you have people that aren't decent and good and evil, or maybe just totally apathetic, and that critical mass can bring down a country. I'm afraid that that's what's happening in this particular time period with the United States. We have reached that critical mass, like in a nuclear reaction, when the nucleus gets to that critical mass, when all that matter gets to a critical mass where it's at the point where it's going to explode. That's where we are with the way our society is today. There's just evil pervasive everywhere, and I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings, but all you got to do is turn on your television set, and if you do and you don't see it, it's because you're part of the problem. Okay. And I know I usually talk to the choir here, but hopefully other people that are seeing this will hear it and say, what in the world is he talking about? All right, so to make this critical mass turn the other way, I think it's too late. We're in such a terrible position now, morally, ethically, decency-wise, that I just don't see it. We're far too decadent. We deny that the sun shines at noonday. That's pretty bad. You probably heard, moving on to Cyprus, that they're now talking about taking 60% of all those life savings, and they're even saying, well, maybe we'll just take it all. You see how this keeps snowballing? Thomas Jefferson said, the amount of tyranny you will have is the amount that you will put up with. Kind of scary, huh? When and how do you react? It's coming here, folks. They'll do it a little different here probably, but it's coming here. Okay, well, they keep us worried about North Korea. They really are destroying our economy. We don't have any manufacturing left to talk about. Oh, there's a little bit, of course, but Dr. Paul Craig Roberts made a really good point. He used to be the editor for the Wall Street Journal, was the economic advisor to Ronald Reagan, a well-educated, experienced man, and he said the problem with sending all of our manufacturing overseas is all of the innovation, all of the creativity goes with it. It doesn't stay here, it follows the manufacturing. So we've lost all of that brain power as well. So we're in trouble in that regard. Is there anything good going on? Okay, David Stockman. He was the former director of the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. And he came out this week. He's got a new book called The Great Deformation. Interesting title. He says, we've been lied to, robbed, and misled. This is coming from the former director of the Office of Management and Budget. And what is he saying in this? That the United States is done, that we're cooked, that we've been robbed, lied to, and misled on everything. And we've just swallowed it, hook, line, and sinker, and gone with whatever our politicians and our corporate executives tell us to do. What's the end game? Well, he's pretty optimistic. He gives us 5 years. All right? 1 to 2 to 5 years. That's optimistic, folks. That $85 billion a month that the Federal Reserve is printing and giving to the banks, they're going to tax you for that. That's why all the Obamacare, now 30% higher premiums than they said before. When government calls something, a particular name, it isn't. And I said this before. The Patriot Act wasn't patriotic. The Affordable Health Care Act isn't affordable. It's PSYOP. It's psychological operations. It's just like they did in the book 1984, double speak, all that kind of stuff. Okay, DHS, along in these same lines, has now come out and said that they can, at any time without a warrant, go into the banks and take anything out of the banks that they think that they have a right to because of any suspicions they might have about you. No Fourth Amendment guarantees, no warrant. They can go into your bank deposit box and take out basically anything that's in there, your silver, your gold, if you have money, it doesn't matter. And of course, the accounts, the sequestered accounts, they're going to do that too, which, by the way, the NSA is already doing. They are now basically combing through all financial records. And so, like the old RICO Act, if something doesn't look, particularly good, let's say that you had a couple of cars in your backyard that you've had for 10 years, and you fix them up and you sell them, and you put, $50,000 in your bank account, and there's no paper trail, they're gonna take your money. That's how serious this is getting. Okay, what's the end game here? What's going to happen? Well, Stockton, California just declared bankruptcy. We know about Detroit. All of this is happening everywhere. The pension funds are falling apart because, the banksters convinced the police unions and the firefighter unions and the city and the county and the state pension funds to invest money in these junk derivatives that now aren't worth anything. And so the pension funds aren't worth anything. So everything's falling apart. And I don't know where that's going to stop. As I said before, I think it's just going to continue downhill very, very quickly. And that brings up the final point for the day. How will this end game work out? Well, some of the states are getting pretty wise. I don't trust state governments by and large either, because so many of them are in cahoots with the people in D.C. But Texas is a good example of kind of what's going on here. The Texas governor, Rick Perry, he's demanded that the state's gold being protected by the Federal Reserve be returned to the state. I don't think he'll get it because it's not there, okay? But he's demanding that they get it back. So states are starting to flex their muscle a little bit. The federal government, I think, what's going to happen, this is going to turn into a civil war eventually of one sort or another. And the end result is going to be the central federal government will be destroyed, both because of the actions of its own making that caused this and outside influences. It's just going to happen. It's just, they're totally disorganized. They're total tyrants. They're dictators. That's why DHS is out there to try to hold on to the power by force, not because of example, but by force. And some of the states might rise up against the federal government, as Texas is kind of doing on this situation, just as an example. So what will happen? I think the United States, like Russia, is going to be broken down into smaller political units. Hopefully it's not devastated and burned to a crisp from a nuclear holocaust. Not very good information, is it? Well, I spent a couple of tapes there, a couple of videos talking about spiritual things, and so now we get dragged back into the world that we find here that we have to respond to. So, as I always say, keep your ear to the ground and your eyes on the horizon, okay? Have a good day.